Would it be a close fight if V1 were to challenge some powerful anomalies present in the SCP narrative? Well, let's examine and look at just what the robot can do, and see if it could compare to even the most powerful anomalies in the SCP narrative.
This must register on an emotional level.
This robot was built for great wars. It fought several kilometer-tall titans and took them down with ease. This robot uses the blood of those it fights as fuel for its own vessel, so it may continue the onslaught. V1, being a blood-fueled robot, challenged several of the most powerful beings in its own lore, and so far has yet to lose. And from these fights against these very powerful beings like the Prime Souls and the Archangel...
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Just hanging around.
V1 has demonstrated speeds that parallel the speed of light, attack potency capable of putting down beings that are very dangerous to the whole lore of Ultrakill, and highly variable durability that ranges from barely better than a robot in real life to being able to go band for band with beings that can threaten solar systems. So yeah, V1's durability is always difficult to pinpoint. Other notable abilities of V1 is extreme agility, amazing ability to parry just about any attack, near perfect combat calculations, and stupid high damage. I mean, like, insane damage that in-game can have numbers with a lot of digits trailing behind it. So with that info dump of V1 out of the way, let's look at the SCPs now. Okay, maybe not the entirety of SCP, because there are thousands of SCPs with varying degrees of power, from harmless objects that have some anomalous properties, to narrative-destroying beings that pretty much do whatever the hell they want. So let's stick with a couple popular SCPs and one absurd one, beginning with SCP-096, the Shy Guy. This SCP is an unstoppable force that if you look at it, then it will do everything in its power to kill you. And it most likely will, unless you yourself have some anomalous powers that are absurd enough to allow you to survive. From the tales, SCP-096 has the power to pull around the sun, run as fast as sound or even light, and is either completely invincible or extremely durable, with the only way to kill it being that you have to crack open its spine and attack the insides of it to put it down for good, essentially disabling its nervous system. And another thing about SCP-096 in some of these tales is that he gets stronger and faster the longer it goes without killing the one that looked at its face. Now, how does this unstoppable Shy Guy stack up to the blood-fueled machine? Well, in this matchup, let's say that SCP-096 is not invincible, and stick with the tale where he was killed by having his spine cracked open and flushed with acid. The issue with this tale, though, is that to be able to crack open SCP-096's spine, they had to use SCP-173, which can break anyone's neck. Not because it's strong, but because that's the rule it goes by. So the confrontation would start by V1 directly staring into SCP-096's face, and the fight would ultimately begin. Both are about similar speed, with V1 having a slight edge, mostly because of its extreme agility and maneuverability. This would allow it to move around SCP-096 while it looks for a weakness, because any of the chunks that are shot off by the robot come back and quickly. The only thing that stays intact when shot is the skeleton, so V1 would try one of the insane damage combos like the dead coin or whatever else in the game you can do to see if that works on breaking this spine, but not before sustaining heavy damage from SCP-096 as it gets more and more mad. This rising anger leads to a linear increase in power and speed, making SCP-096 a more and more formidable foe as time goes on. So V1 would have to keep damaging SCP-096 to use the blood to heal itself after each devastating hit. Now, if V1 can crack through the spine with a dead coin or something like that, then V1 could win, if it follows it up with another direct attack to the inside of the spine of SCP-096. But if it couldn't crack the spine and attack the inside, then the fight would devolve into a contest of V1's blood healing ability and SCP-096's attacks, until Shy Guy either somehow destroys the robot, or what will more likely happen is that he gets way too angry, runs to a corner to cry because he couldn't kill V1. So ultimately the fight boils down to pretty much what you, the viewer, think what would happen, mostly because SCP has no real canon. It just kind of a bunch of tales and documents about a creature. SCP-682 is a giant reptile with an unlimited ability to adapt to its environment, no matter the attacks or strategies used against it. the lizard always seems to be able to adapt a countermeasure of sorts, or even an immunity to whatever is antagonizing it. Some tales have SCP-682 even resisting reality and narrative warping SCP to a lesser or greater extent. It does this in the tales by being a being that extends to the conceptual. This means that as long as a concept of reptiles' hatred, anger, or anything that describes its existence exists, then the lizard will exist. So, can V1 measure up to SCP-682's infinite adapting capabilities? Well, at first, V1 would overpower SCP-682 really easily. This is because it begins as a very weak lizard, only capable of terrorizing towns. V1 would deadcoin, parry, and do pretty much anything else you see in game, which would blow apart the creature into several chunks of meat, which then ultimately come together back into SCP-682. After a long while of pain, SCP-682 would start to resist V1, taking less damage each time until it becomes nearly invincible from all the attacks. This would then lead to the lizard to start to match up with V1, and even catch up to him. After it takes some bites from V1 and seeing that it keeps regenerating using its own blood, it will quickly figure out how to counter V1's healing. This could lead to SCP-682 changing its blood to something that's not blood, or something way too viscous to be absorbed by V1, rendering it unable to heal from attacking SCP-682. So apart from not having a proper way of defeating the lizard, V1 would start to lose its ability to heal as it fights against SCP-682 because, no blood. So V1 loses to a conceptual being that infinitely adapts to counter its adversaries. And now for the secret absurd SCP, or more absurd than the others, I should say. SCP-3812. This SCP is one of the most powerful SCPs from the SCP cosmology, at least from the quick Google search that I did. In essence, anything it perceives becomes real, and it can change anything from any point and any time. It is also written to supersede anything in its own reality, which includes itself, so it keeps getting stronger just by being itself. Combine this with extreme mental degradation, and you got an extremely overpowered, beyond narrative erasing creature that's mentally unstable. So can V1 even compare? No. This being extends to a point where it can even attack concepts and the abstract, just based on how it was written. It has no blood. It can do just about whatever it wants in the SCP cosmology, and even probably superseding that, so V1 would not stand too much of a chance. This is because V1 in Ultrakill has never been shown to attack conceptual beings or even concepts in themselves, so a anti-narrative being kinda stands beyond what V1 has been shown to do even in the games and in lore. So to answer the overarching question, can V1 go against SCP and win? Well, for the majority part of it, yes. Many SCPs are strong but not that strong. But the issue then comes in with those SCPs that are seemingly written to be as strong as possible, almost seeming to try to make the strongest character in fiction and then trying to one-up that somehow. So it just gets to a point where it kind of just becomes a bunch of power scaling nonsense.